What's going on, traders, and welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. In the Weekly Watchlist, I do a technical analysis and give you some of my thoughts on the tickers up here on the left. We have the broad market comprised of SPY, the Qs, and IWM. After that, we look at some companies. We have Apple, Netflix, Tesla, Alibaba, Facebook, Nvidia, Microsoft, and Amazon. I'm sure you can tell by all of these bubbles, plenty of earnings to discuss coming up, but the most interesting thing, in my opinion, is the push and pull going on across the broad market, the three indexes that we watch. So we're going to cover that and some in this video. If you think you might know someone who would benefit by watching this type of analysis, feel free to share it with them, and don't forget all of our free resources are linked down below in the description of this video. Let's hop into the analysis. So jumping right into our SPY weekly chart, a few things to take note of. First one being the structure and shape of our candle. So it looks something like this, a hammer candle, small body, large lower wick, indicating that we did have buyers really step up and close prices actually at the high. So if you look at the candle and where it's formed, it actually formed at our support trend line, which is a bullish thing. And like I said, we closed at the highs, which happened to be above our triple top resistance from the prior 3 weeks. So again, all these things combined, indicating that we are quite bullish right now. The next thing you'll notice is that I did draw in a resistance trend line. So going from the all-time high here, connecting with our first sort of major pullback high, if you will, and you'll notice that we're sitting just below it right now. So all these factors, this third touch could be the one to break out higher. If you remember, our sort of consolidation range that we've been watching looks something like this to form our weekly bull flag. Again, I'll just draw it in quickly. I do think that we are in store for a nice retest of the upper end of the range, if not more, a complete breakout higher. So that's what we're looking for. Let's break down some key levels on the daily time frame. All right, so here is this week's price action. Again, we're just very sideways, a very balanced week. So, buyers and sellers kind of agreeing on prices being fair up around this range. The next thing, again, that we're going to be watching for is a breakout higher to potentially retest the resistance portion of our consolidation range, which is up here at 323.44. Anything higher than that, and remember, we do have a gap in the chart from 325.16 to 332.12. So I think if we retest this and go higher and get some acceptance into that gap, it could fill quite nicely, especially with this balance that's been going on right here. I do think that, again, with the break of this resistance trend line, so a break of that there, again, a retest of this, things are just looking very, very bullish. If that continuation gets into the gap, I would suspect it fills quite nicely to the upside. To the downside, though, if we get rejected off of our resistance trend line and, this balance leads to a breakdown instead of a breakout, we are covered and do have some supports to pay attention to. So first one coming back down is, of course, going to be our 315.62, which is, mid-range through these bodies. But if you're paying attention intraday, maybe look at a 1 hour chart, you'll notice that it is a pretty strong support and resistance. Below that, we have our 314.30 level. Again, it's very important support based on our triple top in here, acted as resistance, and now it is acting as some support in the past 3 days of trading. And lower than that, we have our 312 and, of course, our 308 key support below as well. So we are kind of covered there. Our moving averages will start to move up and continue in the upwards direction as the week sort of trades on and we maintain above them. So those should provide some support. But again, 300 is the ultimate number that we've really resolved above now. I think that that number has been, successfully resolved to the upside. Buyers and sellers have agreed that 300 and above is a fair price, as noted by our higher low here. Is this essentially going to be the next higher low, and will we break out higher is what we are watching for here on SPY. And jumping over to the Qs now, this is where I really want you to pay attention to the differences between SPY, the Qs, and IWM. So remember what we were just talking about on SPY, where the potential for breakout higher was there. On the Qs, I really don't think that we're looking at potential for a breakout higher when in reality, we've been on a pretty impressive run ever since whatever this day was here. We're looking at 629. So ever since 629, resolving the lower end of the channel, we've really just been straight up, and now we're actually outside the upper range of our resistance channel. So, looking at the bullish channel, we're well above our resistance portion up here. It's not to say that it can't continue, but this is not an ideal location to start getting long on Qs and tech. It is sort of getting overextended to the upside, so you would want to see a pullback here. Obviously, if we go higher, we're looking at blue sky territory levels, whole and half dollars, as well as any intraday levels that do form. But to the downside, of course, we do have some supports mapped out. 260.89, key one here, based on where we traded this week. You'll notice in some of these candles, again, if you're looking at an hourly chart, it did act as support and resistance. Below that, though, there's sort of a double bottom that we missed in here, so we'll put that one in. You can tell right about here was that double bottom at 256.50, just about. Anything lower, small gap in the chart to fill down down to 254.27, and lower than that, we'll just call it here at the double top at 251.15. So that should cover us to the downside. And of course, we did talk about the upside, but again, remembering that SPY is ready for a breakout, the Qs are ready for a pullback. It's going to be, one of those things where you have to balance which is going to happen first and which will influence one or the other. So again, SPY going to break out, or will it sort of follow the Qs and tech, and sort of, if this pulls back, will that negate the breakout possibility there on SPY? So this is the balance, the push and pull that I was alluding to. You want to be watching all three of these as we start to trade next week. And lastly, checking out IWM, Russell 2000, and the small caps, you'll notice once again the picture looks completely different once more. So we are starting to break down out of trend. I wouldn't completely call it a breakdown yet unless this candle cannot resolve to the upside early on in the week. The 50 SMA is sort of acting as support as well, so that's interesting to watch for. But again, will this follow the Qs? If the Qs, start to pull back, will that ultimately mean that the IWM and small caps pull back even harder and break that trend line, in a stronger fashion? Or if the SPY breaks out and the Q just sort of has a lackluster pullback, maybe it goes sideways and consolidates, will IWM pop back above? So these are the push and pulls, again, one more time, that I do want you to be watching out for this upcoming week. And there's no way to determine which one will essentially affect which. It's going to be one of those things you have to play by ear as we start trading. But do be aware of it. So anything to the upside, if we get back above our support trend line, we're looking at strong resistance around 145. Again, remembering that the 200 SMA will start to creep down on it as we trade throughout the week. If we do go higher, though, of course, we'll draw in our next most important resistance, which was this one right around here, right around 146.85, we'll call it. Anything higher than that, and we're looking at a retest of 152.38. If this is ultimately a breakdown of our support trend line and things start to turn around and reverse, we have our support at the 50 SMA, which acted really strongly there on Thursday. So watch out for that one as we trade back down. And then, of course, our triple bottom here at 136.31, and then another sort of almost triple bottom, if you will, at 134.45. Anything lower than that, again, top of the gap should provide some support at 130. Gap fills at 125.50. So if you've made it to this point in the video, I'm sure you're enjoying the analysis. Hit the thumbs up button and also subscribe to the channel. That way you know every single time I drop a new video. So getting right into Apple, first thing I want to point out is that we have earnings coming up on the 30th. I want to lay out a few scenarios here for you just so you can sort of understand how I'm looking at the three market indexes we watch and how it correlates to stocks. So let's say we're looking at the Qs and the Qs start to pull back hard early on in the week. SPY doesn't really get the breakout. Then on Apple, for example, what I would be watching for is a breakdown of our double bottom here to potentially move lower and retest our previous breakout area, which is in here between 372.38 and 370.37. Anything lower, and we're looking at support to come in where we had all of these touches in here at 365.24. Lower than that, lastly, I'm going to point out this level here just because it's such a strong support as confirmed by that green candle there. That's at 350.341. So this is a scenario where the Qs pull back hard, SPY doesn't really get its breakout. Let's say SPY does get the breakout, Qs don't really pull back hard, maybe they just go sideways or even slightly upwards, remembering that they are sort of overextended. Then in that case, I would be watching for the double bottom to hold on Apple and then potentially get a retest of the all-time high up there at 385.27. Higher than that will be in blue sky territories, whole and half dollars, as well as any intraday levels that do form. So this is sort of what I want you to be thinking about as we trade early on in the week for all the companies really that we're watching for. How is SPY reacting? How is the Qs reacting? And what does that mean for the company and individual stock that I am trading? So Netflix, just an absolutely impressive move there on Friday with a range of over $44. We got a gap up, pulled back, almost filled the gap. There's still a tiny, tiny little gap in there to be filled, but we'll leave it out for now. And then, it ran from there. So gap fill reversal and really just right up to new all-time highs. Really, really impressive move there on Netflix. So 555.88 is the new all-time high resistance. We do have a level in here, which we'll look at how I got that in just a moment at 544.65. To the downside, though, again, with earnings coming up here on Thursday, actually, after the market closes, anything could sort of happen. So I want you to be prepared for, all of these levels. We have 504.10 as the breakout sort of area where this kind of started from. So watch for that as support. Next one below is at 492.28. And then lastly, lower than that, the previous breakout area here. And previous all-time high, which was set in here at 474.25. So that's kind of covering us to the downside. Do I necessarily think Netflix is going to do something that looks like that? No, it's, again, just like Apple. I don't necessarily think that's going to be in store all the way to our lowest support that we covered. But with earnings coming up, I do want you to be prepared. So have these levels in mind. Lastly, how did I get this 544.65? I just dropped it down to the hourly chart, and you'll notice that what we're looking at is sort of a bull flag, if you will, where we have a flagpole and the flag is starting to form that looks something like that, consolidating sideways, and 544.65 just so happens to be the support that we're looking at in that area. So not much market structure below us there. There's really just straight up candles. So that's going to be the key one to watch, 544.65. Anywhere in here, I would just be watching for intraday levels to form. Tesla is another one that just had an absolutely incredible day there on Friday. As soon as we got the break of this key resistance area around 1420 just about, we really just took off, skyrocketing over the 1500 up to our new all-time high at 1548.92. So we'll mark that one in there just to be aware of where it's at. That's close enough for me. Anything to the downside, of course, we're going to look for a retest of that support and to confirm it as support there at 1420, 1418.69. Just on something like this and how sporadic it moves, I wouldn't be surprised if 1420 is kind of the level. Anything lower, though, and we're looking at the lower end of our sort of first bull flag, if you will, that happened here. It's at 1365. Anything lower than that, and this is where things get interesting just because of all the poor structure that remains below. So we do have a gap that remains unfilled between 1266.40 and 1228.40. So gap here, first of all. Anything lower than that, another gap exists in the chart, anything under 1185.27, and the gap fills once again down to 1134.78. So is Tesla going to do something like this? Again, it's not something that I'm watching for as a high probability setup, but with earnings coming up right around the corner, I do want you to be prepared for anything. Breakout to the upside if this consolidates and sort of has another breakout. 1548.92 is the key level to watch. Higher than that, blue sky territories, whole dollars, $5 marks, $10 marks, $20 marks, so on and so forth on such a volatile stock. Checking in on Alibaba, the Chinese market has been on absolute fire. I'm sure you've read news articles about it, so on and so forth, but we're just going to stick to the technicals. And based on what we're looking at here, we have a clear bull flag that's starting to form, so the pull there, and we're starting to consolidate. We've had a day of pullback or two here, with a nice support forming here at 257.92. Anything lower than that, and a small gap remains in the chart below, so 244 to 241.23. That gap fills. Lower than that, another gap in the chart. So remembering that, kind of ignore that 231 level, but if 230.278 fails, the gap could potentially fill like that down to 225. So lots of room and poor structure to move to the downside. To the upside, though, let's say our sort of double bottom holds up in this area, 257.92 holds. Next resistance is going to be up at 261.84, and then the all-time high at 268. Anything over that is going to be $1.50, as well as any intraday levels that do form, because we will be in blue sky territories. So Facebook, again, just defying the odds. I didn't think it was going to get such traction after this nasty red day. I thought we would see sort of a dead cat bounce up into this area, but we've since continued much higher. Next thing we're watching for is a breakout of this range. So Facebook sort of balanced out just like the rest of the market did, or at least SPY anyways, in the sense that we've had 4 days, not 5, but 4 days here of sideways action, no real expansion of range. So we're watching for a clean break of our all-time high sort of resistance zone up in here, anything between 245.19 and 247.50, we'll call it. So if we get a clean break over that level, blue sky territories, $1.50, intraday levels that do form. But if we do get a breakdown, then I would like to adjust this support slightly to the downside. So it will look something like this. This support is going to come down just a bit to sort of take into account the double bottom that we formed, as well as that level there on Tuesday, it looks like. So that's right around 239.50. Anything below that, we're looking at a move and rotation back down to 232.20. 50 SMA is going to be in between range here, so watch for that to provide a intraday bounce, first touch bounce. But if it breaks, ultimately down to 224.20. Earnings again coming up just around the corner. Be prepared for anything to sort of happen. Nvidia is another one of those ones that just seems like it's going to keep going up forever, having a really impressive run and mirroring what the Qs did exactly here. So again, this is one of those ones where you're going to watch carefully what's going on in the Qs and SPY. If the Qs pull back, then we're looking at a retest of our 409.14. Anything under that, a retest of this area in here, 389.50. I'm sure there will be a intraday level that forms somewhere in the middle there, probably around the $400 psychological support, so watch for that one as well. But if we go lower than that last 389.50, we're looking at 380.17. Basically, this area of the chart here where the breakout all started from should act as strong support. Again, do I think that we're going to see a huge collapse back down into this level? Not necessarily, but again, it will depend on what Qs the SPY do. Anything over our all-time high up here at 426.21, blue sky territories, $1.5, as well as any intraday levels that form. Microsoft, again, we do have earnings coming up around the corner on the 22nd there of July. If we see a strong move in the Qs, and again, just remembering all this intramarket analysis, I think by now you get the point that I think it's really important that you're watching all these things. I've brought it up so many times. If the Qs pull back hard, we're looking at a move down in Microsoft. If SPY breaks out and the Qs go sideways, looking at a move up in Microsoft. Simple as that. Right now we are sort of consolidating sideways. You can see that we do have a doji hammer that's formed off of a key support in here, 211.13. If it holds and we continue higher, then looking for a retest first of our 214.50 resistance. Anything higher is the all-time high resistance at 216.38, and then blue sky territories to follow that. To the downside, if this breaks, Qs pull back, SPY doesn't break out, we're looking at a move to 208, anything underneath that, a move to 204.01, and then by that time, depending on when that happens in the week, we could be getting into the support trend line. Again, that's more than a week away, but do keep that in mind with earnings coming up. Lastly, I would point out this level as well, under 200, and we could go to 196.50. And the last freight train on our list is going to be Amazon. I was like, oh, 3,000 might be a good psychological target for this upcoming week. And what do you know? It continues to make new all-time highs almost every single day of the week, sitting currently up at 32.15. So we'll mark that off as a new resistance up around here. So if that breaks, blue sky territories, $1.5 intraday levels that do form, at that point Amazon would be going completely parabolic. It's really just been straight up the past number of weeks here ever since late June. So watching for more of a pullback to develop in Amazon, but again, just waiting for it to happen, not trying to short the top here because it could always continue higher, but waiting for clear signs of a pullback before potentially getting back in. So if we get a retest of 30.6891 and it looks good, maybe a hammer candle forms somewhere in that area, maybe it looks something like this. Boom, that could be a great potential re-entry for a swing back up to the all-time high. If it pulls back harder, though, and we get a clean break of that 30.68, next level below is 29.55, and then lastly underneath that is our breakout area in here around 27.81. Again, I would imagine that the $3,000 mark acts as some sort of support on the way back down, so be mindful of that area. But Amazon, again, just being a complete freight train, going in the upwards direction, starting to get a little bit parabolic here, but watching for that intramarket analysis as well to determine which direction will go early in the week. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything new, feel free to let me know by leaving a thumbs up or a comment down below in the comments section. Again, subscribe to the channel to be notified every single time I drop a new analysis. And with that, I wish you a green trading week.